Leah and Mordecai Altos, that's how you pronounce it, are going to be speaking about wedding cake in the face, myths and facts. Presentation's over here, so if you all want to have a look at this wall. So, without further ado.
It used to be just a white wall.
First, I'd like to apologize. I've been losing my voice and haven't spoken all weekend just to save my voice for the cake conference. So, okay, so
That's why she has most of the lines of the speech.
so this year we decided to talk about a topic that became very important to us, and for many reasons we had lots of hands-on experience with this topic a couple months ago. So tonight we're going to be discussing the very important issue about myths revolving around wedding cake.
The history of the wedding cake goes back as far as the Roman Empire. There used to be a custom of breaking the cake over the bride's head. Originally, the groom would eat part of a loaf of barley bread, baked especially for the nuptials, and break the rest over his bride's head. History tells us that the breaking of the bread symbolized the breaking of the bride's virginal state and the subsequent dominance of the groom over her. As wedding cakes evolved into larger, more modern versions, it became physically impractical to properly break the cake over the bride's head.
Just not trying hard enough.
Especially with the stands underneath them. The tradition disappeared fairly quickly in some places, but there are still reports of breaking an oat cake or other large cake over the bride's head as recently as Scotland in the late 19th century.
From the middle of the 17th century and on into the 19th century, there was popular use of a dish called the bride's pie. Now, the pie was filled with sweetbread or mince pie, and maybe it could simply be a mutton pie. The main ingredient was a glass ring, and an old myth claimed that the lady who found the ring would be the next one to get married. And the name, the bride cake, emphasized the fact that the bride should be the focal point of the wedding. The cake itself. Now, in the minds of most people, wedding cakes are supposed to be white. The symbol attached to the color white is explained as a tradition. And white has always been purity, virginity, and this notion was first appeared in Victorian times. Okay, white cakes kind of getting rid of that old school stuff. Now, the cake topper. Moving up. The cake topper is usually a miniature model of the bride and groom, which sits on top of the wedding cake. The bride and groom are most often featured in formal wedding attire. The cake topper could arguably be called one of the main attractions of the wedding. Why? Because after a bride's dress, the wedding cake often takes center stage, or so claims weddingcaketoppers.com. Now, while toppers were widely popular in the 20th century, the main spread cake toppers became attractive and more popular in the 1920s. It became so popular that in 1927, Sears and Roebuck mail-order catalogs included a full-page spread of different cake topping ornaments. Now, this once again proves that advertising is playing a major, major role in the way we perceive wedding cakes and all cakes worldwide. Just to remember that. Original wedding cake toppers featured the bride and groom in various poses, and as we see nowadays, stuff has evolved, and you should definitely learn about your wedding guests and how they feel before choosing your appropriate cake topper.
Child brides? No.
Another interesting fact we came across is that many of these cake toppers are used for bachelorette parties and other such parties, and you might not necessarily want certain poses on your wedding cake. Again, think about your guests.
We brought the PG toppers today.
If you would like more, go online to weddingcaketoppers.com. Not that we are endorsing different web pages.
Multi-layer cakes. Nowadays we know that the wedding cake goes by the simple slogan of the bigger the better. It is our belief
Many things in the wedding do go by this theme.
it is our belief this can be tied into many blushing brides' beliefs that the bigger the cake, the bigger the groom. People
I'm happy to see the children went to bed already.
People today are greatly affected by advertising, movies, and TV. In today's society, people need bigger cakes for their advertisements in order to catch clients' attention. This is another simple explanation as to why the multi-layer cake today has become the very, very multi-layered cake and multi-million-dollar industry as well. Many couples freeze the top layer of their cake with the intention of sharing it on their first wedding anniversary. This tradition has its roots in the late 19th century when grand cakes were baked for christenings. It was assumed that the christening would occur soon after the wedding ceremony, so the two ceremonies were often linked, as were the cakes. With wedding cakes becoming more and more fancy and more elaborate, the christening cake quickly took a back seat to the wedding cake.
Cutting the cake. Wedding cakes take center stage in tradition, and the cake cutting ceremony symbolizes the first task that the bride and groom jointly do as husband and wife. The first piece of cake is cut by the bride with the help of the groom. The task originally was delegated exclusively to the bride. It was she who cut the cake and then would share it with her guests, distributing the pieces to everyone. As the weddings grew bigger and the cakes became multi-layered, it became more difficult for the bride to cut the cake and pass it out to all of her guests by herself, and therefore the tradition evolved to the bride and groom cutting the cake together. Look at the beautiful picture.
Love the cake topper.
What is that really doing? I don't really.
She's dragging
She's
him.
dragging him by the foot.
Ah.
The cake cutting became also more difficult with multi-layered tiers, and because the icing had to harden enough to support the weight of the different tiers of the cake. Okay, after the cake cutting ceremony, the couple proceeded to feed one another from the first slice of cake. This provides another lovely piece of symbolism, the mutual commitment of the bride and the groom providing for one another.
Including having cake mushed on their face.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, true fact. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan writes in his book, Made in Heaven, which is a book about Jewish tradition, on page 211, the practice of a cake cutting ceremony has no place in Jewish tradition. We felt the same way, and we kind of questioned why, not to question a rabbi, but why would a rabbi feel this way? And we were wondering if maybe, things always tie into the needs of bride, and you don't want to embarrass a bride if she can't cut the cake together. And maybe the cutting of the cake symbolizes something else, and they don't want that brought into the Jewish wedding.
Yeah, that we don't break anything at weddings.
And now we're moving on. Beyond the cutting and the feeding, we have the smashing. Is cake smashing a premeditated crime, or is it a spontaneous feeling that comes over the couple during the moment of the cutting? Questions one must ask themselves before shoving cake into their spouse's face. If the bride shoves cake into the groom's face first, is he allowed to reciprocate?
Yes.
Is the dress bought or rented?
We will touch on that. We got out all these problems. Yes,
You might
dear.
notice 35 Jews, 40 opinions.
Yes. If the bride shoves first, is the groom allowed to reciprocate?
Many people say it is okay for the bride to shove cake into the groom's face because he did not spend hours, apparently, doing his hair and makeup.
True.
Others say it is unfair and reverse sexism.
Yeah.
Now,
It's sexism that she puts on the makeup in the first place. But
Yeah.
if the bride's dress was from a gamah and the cake is chocolate, one should refrain from doing damage to the dress. But if the cake is vanilla, then a different debate will be applied as opposed to the chocolate cake. A groom should never put chocolate cake on his bride's face.
Especially if she's allergic.
Well, you should find out before you marry your bride whether she's allergic to chocolate or not.
I'd just like
One
to
of those
point out here, I'd just like to point out here that we never smashed cake in each other's faces.
That's
Okay,
pure
in
misleading.
the end of our presentation, we will open up the floor to personal opinions, but
And if anyone feels the need at a later point to shove cake in their spouse's face, we're okay with that.
Not limited to wedding.
On a personal note, people should be aware of the fact that thick fondant frosting does not smash very well into one's face. So, if you intend to smash your wedding cake into someone else's face, please make it out of soft frosting.
an award-winning wedding photographer has a few thoughts on the topic. On the one hand, they say that this cutting of the cake and shoving of the cake or smashing of the cake does bring out beautiful, excellent, spontaneous, emotion-filled shots. But if the question of where to draw the line comes up, one photographer says, usually when prospect clients see the pictures, the bride tells the groom not to even think about it. He also notes that when the cake cutting is done early in the evening, the event remains well organized and in control. But when it happens later on, when lots of alcohol has been flowing, people have been drinking, then things do tend to get a little out of hand and a little bit crazy. Now, the
I
question
want a
of...
picture of that.
No, not up to that. The question of smashing versus shoving. One might think it is okay to get a clown's input on the subject, and we all know that clowns prefer the smashing approach. Some believe that whoever smashes the greatest quantity of cake in their partner's face will have more control in the marriage. I did actually find that fact on the internet, so
Which means it's verified and true.
it's true. For others, the grooms in particular, smashing the cake in his beloved face can be the quickest route to a honeymoon on the couch, a very lonely place. The only time when a proper cake shoving is most appropriate is when one is getting married in Vegas. Our personal opinion on the matter. It is our belief that different sects of Judaism have different traditions. For example, the Moroccans believe in a violent outlook towards the wedding cake. A groom should smash the cake into his bride's face. This is for two reasons. One, to put her in her place, no offense to Moroccans, and two, to show her what will happen in the future if she would dare make a meal that he thought was bad or untasty.
Hasidim prefer not to smash for fear that smashing will lead to touching or, even worse, dancing. They are also concerned about the strimal and the expensive sheitel that the newlyweds are wearing.
The Breslevs believe, just as they say in na-na-nach, when they believe ooga. Open to any interpretation, as most things with them are.
Kippa Sruga believes a friendly shove with laughter is okay. The international award-winning cake house has a cake specially designed for smashing. This is a water-based, stain-free, drip-free, color-free, free-range, organic cake perfect for such occasions.
Is it edible?
Be sure to read the fine print before ordering.
It's meant for smashing
The big question, what did we do? As odd as it sounds, we actually sat down and ate dinner at our wedding. This is our lovely little table. We're not going to talk about the fangs in the corner on the table. Another time, we sat down and ate, and then we were brought a wonderful, one-of-a-kind cake
From
that
the refrigerator at the catering hall.
clearly wrote congratulations and a personal note to us and was not mass-produced in their kitchen. We then began to cut the cake very nicely.
I was helping her cut the cake.
Yes, as a joint effort. Now, you may notice the groom's face. I would like to say on my behalf, this was not premeditated. I wanted that lovely classic picture of the bride and groom feeding each other cake. And as you'll see, that did happen. Very nicely fed my new husband a piece of cake. And then a dear friend of mine's voice pops into my head. And this friend told me there's one reason she would want to get married. And that is to take cake and shove it so far up the groom's face that he would be blowing out cake for the next month. This friend is subsequently still single. I'm saying after, come see me. So that thought, this friend's very vocal voice did end up in my head. Next. And as the comment was made, fondant does not smash. That is the cake, in fact, in my hand.
Fondant does fold, I should mention.
It folds and crumbles, and it just...
To be a speech bubble, it's totally worth it.
And as you can see, I truly did not feel that there was anything wrong with my wonderful actions, and my husband did understand that he could not reciprocate.
Please also notice that her husband protected his white tie with a napkin before.
He did have a feeling what would
Yes.
come. We made very special one-of-a-kind thank you notes depicting the scene. So if someone would like a one-of-a-kind picture of cake smashing, feel free to send us a wedding gift and we will give you a one-of-a-kind thank you note. Beautiful picture.
Can I ask 2 questions? I
Yes.
have 2 questions. So one is from personal experience of having a cake smashed in one's face. But a lot of the cake flies around. Not just into the face, but like there's collateral damage to people
It
behind
wasn't
it.
me, by the way.
What?
It was not me.
Yeah, it was not my wife. Not my wife.
Other women
There's,
threw cakes at him.
it's a deep matter that physicists have been discussing for many years because it depends on the velocity of the cake as well as the mass
And the fondant to protect.
Right, and
The fondant
the
kind of-
matter that the cake is made out of. So each one is a case by case.
And the second question is, I've noticed that Israeli wedding halls don't let you eat the cake. They actually serve the same
actually
cake
only
wedding
one
after wedding.
Okay,
Did you see the cake in our photo?
Yes, we insisted at our wedding that we want to eat our cake, and the wedding hall was shocked and appalled and quickly made a new one.
so we actually ate our cake
Just
and
because you
then
paid for it doesn't mean you get to eat it.
we ate our cake and then we asked the waitress to pack it up and bring it home for us. And 2 days later, when my mother took the cake out of the fridge, it had magically become whole again. So we think the waitresses ate the cake, and at the end of the way, when we said we want our cake to take home, they just pulled out a duplicate. True story.